Recording.
Okay, give me how about a 10-second countdown?
10, 9.
Well, how's everyone doing today? This is your host, Bob Gums, with the Concerned Forum, and we're going to have a very interesting show today. I have my good friend as my guest, Mr. David Strom. Now, for me to try and tell you about this man, especially with my slow talking self, would take much more time than we have on the calendar. How's that? But I will suffice it to say that this man is a teacher, an educator, and see, one can be a teacher, as we have found out with the New York public school system, unfortunately. One can be a teacher, but not necessarily be an educator. Fortunately, in our case, Mr. Strom is both teacher and educator and activist and military and commercial pilot and philosopher and a whole bunch of other things. Oh, and I must not forget, a noted author. I think I like best to give him the title of philosopher. One reason is because the times that we are living in today's America, it calls for philosophy. I will call it a philosophy of sanity. And with that, Brother Strom is truly well endowed. Before we venture into that aspect of today's program, just let me say that I hope that you all have been keeping up with what's going on, or I should say what's coming, the madness that's coming out of our nation's capital. But then when you have a buffoon occupying the nation's highest office, what can you expect but insanity? I pray every night for my comrades on active duty, especially those stationed anywhere in Southern Europe or the Middle East, because it seems like Donald, what he's trying to do, he's trying to show the world that he's a tough guy without having to actually go to war. And see, the problem with Donald is that even though he doesn't intend for us to go to war, the way that he keeps clowning around, and remember, he has two people who are very close to him as his advisors who want to go to war against Iran. And see, what worries me the most, especially with my experience that I've had in the military, is the fact that he will clumsily back us into a war. And that would be a tragedy of unmitigated proportions. Remember, and this happened, as a matter of fact, I was still on sea duty. This happened, I think, shortly before I was assigned to the White House. I was on the USS Nimitz. No, as a matter of fact, it was shortly after I had left the Nimitz and had came back to the States. We shot down the cruiser, American cruiser, the Vincennes, accidentally shot down an Iranian commercial plane with 290 people in the Persian Gulf. Blew them, blasting them out of the skies, okay? Now, can you imagine you're going for a vacation or something of that nature, traveling on business or what have you, sending your grandkids to meet their grandparents, typical thing that people use the airlines for nowadays. And, you're flying along, and the next thing you know, you're surrounded by a huge explosion, and then darkness, and then water, because you have been blasted out of the skies and into the Persian Gulf. Well, that's what America, that's what we did, okay? So all this nonsense about, well, Iran, they have constantly provoked America, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not correct, see? And see, this is the thing that makes Trump so dangerous, because the things that he says, half the time, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. The other half of the time, he's appealing to the most base, the most hateful instincts in people. And that's what he's doing with Iran. But you know what? It's funny, because the Iranians, they handled that whole situation. 290 of their citizens killed for no reason. And they handled it like gentlemen. Yeah, like gentlemen. Now we have Trump in the White House. He tears up the treaty. It was a fairly decent treaty. It kept him away from making nuclear weapons for 10 years. He tears it up. Why? Because the black boy did it. So now we're stuck with the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran. Real smart. Way to go. Well, we're going to get into some of that, more of that particular situation a little later down the road. But right now, I want to get David's opinion. I have a theory about this whole upcoming election, and it hinges on race. And this is America's weak point. All these adversarial nations, they know that to basically tear us apart, all they have to do is throw in that whole racial thing, and we fall apart. And see, that's exactly what Donald Trump has been doing ever since he entered national politics. And it's a shame. It's a disgrace for a man like that to be president of these United States, because all he wishes to do is to continue to appeal to the worst instincts in people. And it's a shame. But tell me, Dave, what do you think on that along those lines?
Well, the first item you mentioned about the shooting down in 1988 of the Iranian airliner, I don't think, and many people don't think, that it was an accident, because I think there's enough intelligence around to know about the operations of a country like Iran and the role of airliner taking off and going to some destination. So many of us say that was no accident.
Okay, hold on a second. I don't mean to cut you off.
Yes.
And we can discuss that aspect later. But I will tell you, there's a reason why that accident occurred. And I'm not going to go into it now because I don't want to interrupt what you're getting ready to say, because I think it's very important. But there was a reason why that happened. But I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to get into that. But trust me, I know from the inside out that that was an accident. And I'm embarrassed to even tell you why, being still loyal to the Navy, right? But it was an accident. But what I want you to tell me and tell the folks, what is this thing that it's a national, you see, that's what I'm trying to get across. That's what I want to get across to our fellow citizens, because we have to live here with each other. And we have to understand that this whole thing, politicians running based on race and nothing else, such as what Trump is doing, It is a national security danger because it's being used to weaken this country, to weaken our standing around the world. And Donald Trump, by him happily doing this and saying the things that he does and says, he is the biggest security risk that this country has going. And I'm just trying to find someone to tell me, and I'm not saying all American white folks believe this nonsense, because obviously that's not true, thank God. But that minority, that rather large minority that does cling to these old falsehoods and superstitions, what the hell is it? What makes Alabama, for example, a place, one of the poorest areas in the Western world? I'm not going to say the world, but as far as the Western world is concerned, Alabama is one of the lowest places out of any of the Western countries.
Don't forget Mississippi.
I'm sorry, you're right. It's a race. Alabama and Mississippi are in competition as to which state, which area is heading down the toilet first. Why do I have time to be worrying about a woman's right to control her body? A woman and what black, there goes a black boy with a college degree. He must be a communist. That is the insanity that comes out of the mouths of these people. I have heard it with my own 2 ears when I was down there in my naval adventures. Why, David? Tell me why.
Well, it's relatively simple. This cannot be separated from economics. You have a situation here in this country, and this is a country that is run by the rich and powerful. And the idea of this racial infrastructure that they have developed from early on in the history of this country is a technique to use against the people for the advantage of the rich and powerful. So even though they represent a small fraction of 1% or less, they're able to control and manipulate people because of the system that is called, correctly, white supremacy racism. And it works very well. So it's essentially playing people against each other for the advantage of those who are rich and powerful, and it's working like a charm today as it did yesterday. It is one of the best techniques for the ruling elite of this country, United States of America, to control people by manipulating people around phenotype. Yeah. Now, when I say phenotype, phenotype relates to how you look. You know, in the schools, they don't regularly teach anthropology, but they ought to teach that, about why people look different, why people from different parts of the world happen to look different. And the way they look is a phenotype. So it's very easy for that fraction of 1% to play people with different phenotypes against each other. Now, we might want to know, how did people get to these phenotypes that they are? People, quite a few of them from Europe have the pinkish skin and string-like hair. Many of them from Africa have the helix hair, which is curly and darker skin. And many Asians have an epicanthic fold, which is something developed to protect them from the wind over tens of thousands of years. That's why people look different. And even though humanity essentially came from Africa and went out to different parts of the world, and over tens of thousands of years, people adjusted to their environment.
Good.
So now, over here in the United States, fast forward that to when this place was created, and we institutionalized chattel slavery.
Yeah.
You had to have ways to play people against each other. So essentially, the long and the short of it, today that is still being played very effectively because it is an economic benefit for those who rule at the expense of all the people. That's the people we call white, black, or whatever. It's used against all the people to benefit the rich and powerful.
So you're saying that the basic scientific reasons why, over a period of time, mankind originated it. I think that's you. So essentially, all mankind, we all come out of Africa.
Yes.
Now, every scientist that I have ever read, black, white, Asian, no difference. They all say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we traveled out of Africa, and we started going to different places.
That's right.
On the planet, bit by bit.
But the average student doesn't know this. They don't
And-
teach us in the schools.
Right, and as we traveled, due to the climatic changes,
Exactly. Our body is going to
our body
adjust
adjusts and adapts.
over thousands of years. It
Yeah,
adjusts.
we're talking, over tens of thousands of years.
That's right.
So that is a normal, natural,
That's right.
biological thing.
But we're the same species.
Yeah, we're still the same species.
Yeah.
In other words, I can have a baby with an Asian lady.
That's
She
right.
can have a baby with a European person.
That's right. That's right.
So, see, that is the qualification. As
Excellent.
long as you can have a child
That's right.
with someone else,
Mm-hmm.
you're part of the same species.
Yes.
In other words, we are all the same team.
Yes, that's it. But the way to control is to divide people up. There's no way that the ruling class here, and when I say the ruling class, I mean the people that control the banks, people that control the finance industry, real estate, insurance, manufacturing,
The government.
the corporations, and they control the government also.
Okay.
And this is the number one jewel in how they can control by white supremacy racism, which is ridiculous because people don't get it. But as long as you can play people against each other, they will be headed towards dealing with the wrong enemy.
Right.
You see, they don't know the enemy. They know, our problem is the so-called immigrants. Our problem is black people. All kinds of ways that you have to control folks by diverting attention from the real problem, which is the people who, in those areas that I just mentioned, that rarely run the country. They own the Congress, they pay the Congress people, and you think most of them represent you. They are representing their real constituents, which is the group of people that pay them all the money so they can even run for the office.
Okay, well, see, that's the same problem with that insane business that Hitler and the Nazis did, which, by the way, that was the reason why German democracy collapsed, because the people allowed themselves to be carried away by Hitler and the Nazis and that garbage that they were saying about, well, it's all the fault of the Jews, when in reality, it was the fault of the people that basically controlled the economics of the situation.
If you want to rule, you have to find ways to draw attention away from yourself and put it on somebody else.
Yeah, and see, that's why what Trump is doing, that's why it's so damn dangerous.
But people don't get it.
Well, see, if you sit down and you take a book, say the book's called How German Democracy Fell in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and then you take another book about American democracy and the struggle for survival, early 21st century, right? It's like almost word for word. You read the stuff that the Nazis were saying, and then you read the stuff that Trump and the Republican parties have been saying, and it's almost identical. See, it's almost damn identical. And to me, that is what is so scary. Now, Trump in this business about the immigrants, and let me say something for the purpose of honesty, right, and the purpose of clarity. This gentleman and myself, we happen to attend the same church. As a matter of fact, almost 8 years, well, no, it's been about 6 or 7 years ago, that's when I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman and his fiancée at the church which I now attend. That's Community Church. And I learned a lot from this brother. That's how he wound up becoming my friend. I don't suffer fools gladly. And the idea of the word fool being in the same sentence with David Strom, that in itself is insanity. But one of the things that I learned was how easily you can take a religion and how you can take an economic tribulation and you can use that to drive people up the wall and then also twist their way of thinking, see? And that's what happened to the Weimar Republic. Real quick, Weimar Republic. You have World War I, 1914, ends November 1918. They have a peace conference, which basically goes into 1919, Treaty of Versailles in France. And what happened, Germany, after they had gotten rid of the, not the Tsar, but they had the Kaiser, and same thing, and they became a democracy. Problem was, it was kind of a weak democracy because of the fact when it came time to stand up on certain issues, they didn't do it. They didn't stand up. Great, as a matter of fact, in the 20s, Germany was the most technologically advanced and culturally advanced society in the world. And yet, within a couple of years, they basically went to the level of super barbarians. They missed having the nuclear bomb. We beat them by about that much. They came that close to world domination. And you have to ask why. And see, when you talk about Gestapo, the knock at the door at 3 in the morning, see, those are the type of things that you have to look at. What makes the society get on that trip? And in Germany, I mean, you can see it. You can see it for yourself if you bother to open a book about the subject. The same nonsense that Trump does nowadays, singling out the minorities, talking about roundup. They're going to round up all the immigrants. as if they were the cause of America's economic problems, which it's simply not true. That's a lie. And also to subvert the minds of working class white people by telling them that, yes, it is the intellectuals, the academics, the lawyers, these are the people that are responsible for your terrible situation in life. And also, just like you have these fundamentalist, right-wing religious preachers that you got running around here now, you know, getting on TV, trying to raise money to buy their, you know, $30 million jet plane, you had the same kind of schmucks back then. The only, you know, and they were doing the same thing. Oh, well, we must support the leader. Just like when you hear these preachers now talk about, oh, well, we must support Trump. He is our leader. And standing in front of the nation's capital on the steps there and saying, oh, God really blessed us by making you our leader in this time of trouble. In other words, saying that the black guy who was there before Trump was so terrible. They still ain't said what he was so terrible, what was so terrible about him, just that he was terrible. And I guess what made him so terrible was because he was black. Now, there were things about Obama I did not agree with, but trying to turn him into a super monster, no, that's a racial thing. And I keep asking why Trump's policies with the tariffs and the trade, he's destroying talking about the family all the time, yet his policies are destroying white farm families. Why are you going to follow behind a gun like that? Tell me, man.
Well, you know, it's relatively simple. You have to draw attention away from what you're doing and putting it somewhere else. You can stand there all day and talk about the bad Chinese and how they're stealing American business and jobs and all that. So we're going to punish them by making tariffs on their products and whatnot, even though that means that Americans that buy those products have to pay the tariff. They're going to be charged for it.
Yeah.
And ignoring the fact that many of those companies are American companies who went offshore.
Right.
Who, you know, I mean, people don't understand that the nature of capitalism is very clear, and that is to make profit.
That's what it's there for.
Profit, that was what it is there for.
Exactly.
Profit, that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line, not to create jobs.
That's
they don't
right.
care anything about creating jobs. Their job as capitalists is to make money for themselves and for the management
Right.
and for the people who hold the shares. So people don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump can stand there and trot out all the scapegoats, and people flock to that, and they're losing attention away in terms of seeing what he is doing to benefit the rich and the powerful. And that's what he did with the tax bill, the Trump tax bill.
Oh, God.
And I don't know anything that he is doing that really benefits the mass of the people. The people, he doesn't really care anything about that.
Oh,
he cares for the rich and the powerful. So,
Right.
you know, people don't understand that. And they're blinded by racism because it's an emotional issue, just like you mentioned, women being in charge of their own bodies.
Right.
They want to take that away from women, control women, and anything else he can do to bring attention away from those people who he's serving, and that's the rich and the powerful.
See, now you told me if I was wrong. A couple of points. I told an individual, happened to be Caucasian. Oh, well, why, and she had voted for Trump too. Well, how come Trump just doesn't tell all these corporations to get together and start hiring people? And because she was from the Midwest, she is from the Midwest. And I told her, I said, listen, you're a nice person. And, that's why I didn't laugh in your face when you told me that you had voted for Trump. But you don't, and I told her, I said, you don't get it. In the first place, you understand I said, baby, you understand what's going on when they're talking about Bernie Sanders and he's no good because he doesn't like capitalism? And she said, well, I really don't, get into that aspect of it. And I said, well, that is the aspect. That is what it's all about. Because capitalism is basically how you make money. Okay?
Well, this is a good point you're making here because
it was just what I tried to explain to her.
Right.
That's the job of a capitalist, to make money.
Yeah, that's right. And the point I'm making is you have the victims of economic system supporting the economic.
That's deep.
That's the victims of the economic system that's impoverishing, so saying they support that system.
That is deep.
You see, so
when you are so slick and so cool that you can get your victims to support their victimization.
That's it.
That's what it's all about.
That's what's going on.
You know what? I remember now what brought this conversation. It wasn't an argument or anything, but I hope anyway, it was a learning opportunity for her. Because I said, because she was talking this, and a lot of them talk that, and especially from folks like Michigan and Western Pennsylvania. They'll be talking this, because I think, is that where Kathy's from? Yeah, she's from Western PA. And they talk this nonsense. And you don't hear them saying it that much anymore. But remember before Trump got elected, you would hear these people, we need a business person in the White House. That's what we need in the White House. We need a businessman in the White House.
They don't get it.
Yeah.
And that brings me up to the point that you mentioned in the beginning about education. And that really caught my ear.
Yeah.
Education. Now, what you said was extremely important for this reason. What we call education in this country is not education. It's training. Training. There's a difference between training and education. Education, as I see it, involves a condition where the person who is being educated is empowered and has the ability to analyze and look at where he is and understand. So education involves the ability of people to think for themselves. Training is to train people to fit along with the status quo that we have here. So most people, whether we're talking about the primary level, whether we're talking about the secondary level, or whether we're talking about the tertiary level, or doctoral level, you see, people are trained, they don't want you to be educated. If you were educated, why would you operate in a way against your own interests?
There you go.
You see, and what you're talking about, these people, whoever they are, the masses who are operating against their own interests, they vote against their own interests, they do everything against their own interests, as the ruling group is able to laugh because they say, we got them now. They're up there fighting to maintain something that is against their own interests. So that is my thought about what you had said in the beginning.
Well, see, what I told her was, look, you guys, and of course by you guys, I'm referring to the people back at that time, because we're talking, what, 2014, 2015, before Trump got to the White House. And this nonsense of, we got to have a businessman in the White House. And I said, listen, there's a difference between a politician and between a businessman. And she was like, what's the difference? We need a guy that just knows about business. And I said, well, hell, when you go into the store and get a six-pack of beer, that's a business course right there, because you're dealing with supply, demand, price, what have you. I said, especially in a system that's supposed to be functionally democratic, okay? A person in politics, in government, all right, an elected official, I have some control, not as much as I should, but I have some, because I have chosen that man or woman for that particular office. When you're talking about business, that's a whole different story. The job of a business person is to make money. Under the capitalist system, our economic system is capitalist. And in the capitalist system, if you have a business, then your job is to make money. If you're not making money, then you don't belong in business. And I said, by the way, let me remind you, Trump is not famous for making money. He's famous for having a very good inheritance. And his dad was real creative in how he cheated you and I with his tax dodging schemes. He dodged his taxes the same way that he dodged the draft, okay? But you have to understand, there is a hell of a difference between being a business person and being a president. Because a lot of the things that are required of a president, you're not going to get paid for. This is not a profitable enterprise. Democracy is a form of government and a way of life. It has nothing to do with making money. And I said, that's what folks like you don't understand. You were out of work 2 years ago, right? And she says, yeah. And I said, remember when you first got your notice that you was out of work, what did they tell you to do? Go over and see about applying for your unemployment. Yeah. Well, anybody making any money off of that? No, I was on unemployment. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Those are things that the president is supposed to make sure happens. And it has nothing to do with making money. A business person cannot do that. But it's the job of that president or that congressperson to make sure, however your state has it set up for your unemployment insurance, it's that job of those elected officials to make sure that everything is done correctly so that you, Kathy, will be able to get your unemployment check every 2 weeks or every month or however it's done. I said, you see what I'm saying? Being president has hardly anything to do with being a good businessman. And like I said, and again, by the way, Trump was a lousy business person. So you're getting shot down on both counts. It's a big difference. You cannot run a country the same way you run a business. It's two entirely different things. If I'm working somewhere, my boss tells me to go do something, and I know that there's a 75% chance I'm going to get my butt shot off, I'm going to tell him to go climb a tree. But see, that's the kind of stuff that the president can do. But a businessman can't do that. You see?
Well,
There's a lot of, there's a whole, and I try to point out to her, there is a lot of differences between the corporate idea of capitalism and making money and the idea of being a government elected person in the government. It's just two different things. And a lot of folks don't understand that. And unfortunately, that's why I know some people, that's why they voted for Trump. Besides the racial factor and the propaganda factor with the Russians and what have you. See what I'm saying?
well, a number of things you've mentioned here. First of all, I don't believe that there's anywhere in the Constitution that says that this is supposed to be democracy. I don't think that's mentioned. Democracy, as I see it, has to do with the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. As I look at this has nothing to do with that. Because those people who are at the commanding heights and run the countries, those people in that 1% or less, those people in Congress, in the state legislatures, in the local office also, most of them, they work for those people at the top. The only way only thing we need to do is look how those at the top select the ones who are going to run to a large extent and let the people think that they're electing some folks that they want. But there's no way that you're going to be, for example, you could be president of the United States unless you're vetted by the rich and powerful. There's no way that you're going to get any money from them, and there's no way that you're going to do it without being vetted for them to get their support. So this idea of democracy is a nice idea, but it's not something that we have. We have a plutocracy, a government of the rich and powerful, for the rich and powerful, and against the masses of people. That's why you have, in this country, close to half the people are poor. Close to half the people are poor or near poor. So, we throw around the term democracy loosely, so let's hold it and think this over before we go on with it.
Well, you know what? I would agree with you up to this point. And see, forgive me, when I was giving Mr. Strong his byline, when I reintroduced him to the family out there, I forgot to give the title of this really excellent book. Look at that. Look at that. Man, you must have been something, man. I could look, young junior officer,
Right.
Lieutenant Strump, playing the game. And I know you was playing some game back in the day, too. Look at that. Sharp. My man, sharp. But this book, oddly enough, really encapsulate the whole conversation that we're having here. And I'll tell you why, at least from my end of it. Because the way I see our problem in this country is that the biggest problem that we have, and I say this as a child of the working class. Both of my parents were working class. My dad was a union shop steward, and both of my parents were Republicans. damn good Republicans until we start getting deeper and deeper, going into the late 60s. Okay? However, the racial aspect comes into it, and this is part of the game. Because of race, working class white people have almost, you could say, almost entirely been bred to vote against their own class interest. Now, when I say that, I'm not trying to say by any means that, yeah, no matter what, you always have to vote the interest of your class. No, I'm not saying that. Because I know what some heads out there are thinking. You always are supposed to put country first. But I believe that voting for what's best for the country as a whole, for the American people, that to me, that's always a winner. But we can't do that. That's why America is in the shape that it's in. Because you have one party that for the last several decades, they have just worked upon getting people to vote against the interest of the mass majority of the American people by using race. And see, to me, that's where this whole concept of playing the game or not knowing how the game is being played, that's where you can see it. You can see it best. A white guy, I can't remember his name. Was it for the New Yorker? This was about 4 or 5 months ago. I can't remember which magazine. I think it was the New Yorker. But he wrote an article, and the title of his article was something to the effect of how racism is killing white people. Mm-hmm. See? And I can't think of nothing better to prove my hypothesis that playing the game, that's what this game has been all about.
Exactly.
You having white folks chasing behind this whole race thing, and basically they're killing themselves in the process. Everything that, for example, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Democrat, okay? But I'm saying this because it's real. Things, for example, like trying to expand health care, okay? Trying to put more money into research and development, on health issues, things of that nature, trying to stop with the pollution, environmentalism, because more low-income white folks are dying, having to breathe all that polluted crap in the air. Louisiana is a perfect example. Texas is another perfect example of how the environment is so filthy, right? That going into the lungs, the high cancer rates, okay? And anytime you get a candidate out there that's trying to fight, we got to stop this oil burning plant from being built here in this area. And most of the people that live in that area are lower income white people. But you're going to then have some damn Republican with the support of these religious fundamentalists and the anti-abortion crew, right? And the anti-Obama type people, because you remember, Obama is a black guy, and those are the kind of people that the communists support, that socialism stuff. And so you have people voting against their own life, literally. And see, That's where this book comes in, as almost like, I call it a Bible, because white Americans generally, especially obviously low-income whites, they don't know how to play the game. They don't even know or realize that a game is being played. How the hell you going to play baseball if you don't even know if there's a game?
That's it.
Right?
You're so right on that. The point is, it's a massive game. That's the only way we could be in the condition that we are in now.
Yeah.
And we have already spoken about phenotype. And most of the people in that creationist, in terms of taxonomy, they call them white and with the pink skin, the stringy type hair and whatnot, and they identify with most of the ruling class who has those same physical characteristic in terms of phenotype, and identify with their worst enemy. And it's hard to get that over to people.
But they can't be my worst enemy because I'm white and they're white.
Yeah, see, but that's the point.
Yeah.
They don't understand that, and to their own detriment. That's why we don't have things in this country to the extent that we should have to benefit the people. That's why we got poor people.
Yeah.
That's why we have bad conditions in terms of health, in terms of unemployment, in terms of
education,
real education. That's why we have it that way, because the ruling class, that small fraction of 1%, can manipulate the people against, as you say, against their own interests. And they work it like a charm.
Yes, they do.
And, Trump is a master at it. He's not the only one. And for the sake of truth, I don't belong to any party. Even though I know that in the past, most of black people belonged to the Republican Party.
That's right.
And then they kind of switched over. But the point is that people don't understand the game. If you don't understand the game, you're lost. And that's what's happening today. And it's going to have all kind of detrimental effects on the population. White people are dying off. They're committing suicide. Taking people are paying attention to them, taking all these drugs and whatnot now. And that's all part of the game.
Man, you just hit the nail right on top of the head. Remember when opiate narcotics, that was that resided strictly in Harlem. And I use Harlem as a symbol for, quote unquote, the black area. I mean, it could be Harlem.
No more.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It could be Harlem. It could be Watts. It could be Atlanta. Inner city black folks sitting around getting high, shooting drugs, blah blah blah. Right? Now that, and it's not. How should I say? It's not being vindictive, because opiate, the devastation that addiction brings to a family, we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that happen to any family of any ethnic background or color. But the sad thing is, and come on, folks, let's be real here. When this was something that was looked upon primarily as a thing that black folks did, not that much was made of it, except law enforcement made a lot of overtime. I mean, let's face it. And Nixon came out with his war on drugs, okay? And all that did, basically, it made law enforcement a popular career choice, okay? Because if you wanted to be a cop, that was great, because that puts you right there in the middle class lifestyle. because your income would go sky high because you were joining up to fight in the war. And the war on drugs became a war against against Hispanics. And like I say, a lot of people made a lot of money. You had a lot of phony private businesses that rebranded themselves. And the next thing you know, some schmucks that had no idea about penal institutions, they're selling their services to the government, saying, "Hey, we can provide you with security guards for your prisons," and so you privatized the prison industry, and that caused a skyrocketing amount of abuse because you had some knuckleheads that had no concept of how to handle people, especially men, and you got these guys running prisons. And the whole thing, it was blown to such a magnitude that now America incarcerates more of its citizens than any place else in the Western world. As a matter of fact,
In the world.
in the world, yeah, you caught me right. In the world, we have done better in terms of the amount of people that we lock up than South Africa did in the days of apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's insanity. But now, because of the fact, and this is true, that opiate addiction has discovered white America, white middle class America. Opioid addiction has discovered Ozzie and Harriet. Now we see all this concern. Well, I'm not upset about the concern. I'm angry because that concern should have been there all along.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the problem that I have with it.
Yes.
But it's good. What's his name? Kushner. That's the other side of the Trump family, right?
That's the guy that his father bought his way into Harvard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now this kid, he's an expert on prison reform.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
Well,
it should be his dad. His dad was the one that did time.
Right. Well, as I look at this, it would do us a lot of good if we completely change these laws, these drug laws. I'd like to see the elimination of drug laws because they don't make any sense.
No, they don't.
And people ingest things that are dangerous to them all the time, like cigarettes and alcohol and whatnot. And in the case of people who have trouble with dealing with those items that are dangerous, then that should be handled as a medical problem.
Yes, it should.
So I would like to see the ending of all these drug laws and taking it away from the police department and handling it as a public health
issue.
Issue, yes.
I agree 100%. Only what upsets me is the fact that all the lives now that need to be put back together, those that can be put back together, because this war on drugs, which was essentially a war on people of color, a lot of people lost their lives. And those lives are not going to be able to be put back together. But you're right.
The ruling class has a number of ways of killing people.
Yeah.
They can kill you physically, or they can give you a living death. And that's what they do to a lot of people.
On that sad note, there is also there's some cause for happiness because people are finally starting to wake up. The only question as to whether or not it will be in time because we still have. I guess that would be for the next time I have Brother David here, because we still have to talk about climate change. And there again, you have the whole, this whole ugly thing of racism raising its head, because you have the whole setup, the way Trump and the Republicans have set this thing up. You got them saying, okay, white males, if you listen to the liberals, the people of color and women will they will use climate change as an excuse to further erode your power in the society and take your jobs. And unfortunately, too many of our white brothers have bought into this. And see, that's why I say you have about 3 issues, 2 or 3 issues, that's all, that if you tackle these 2 or 3 issues, you'll solve about 80-90% of the problems that American society has to face. Because even though they might look totally different, they are, when you study them closely, they're linked to what? They're linked to race, this whole racial thing, see? And this is what we have to stop. We have to stop this nonsense. We have to make people confront these issues while we still have a country. Russia or China, they don't need to try and send an army over here to tear this country down, to attack this country, because all they have to do with propaganda is basically have us chopping, trying to kill each other, as they're doing now by the use of Donald Trump politically. And people need to stand up, and we need to speak out.
Sounds like we need time for another program.
You got that right.
Okay.
Folks, God bless you. We love you. Thank you for having us in your home. Next week, same time, same channel. Take care. Thank you, my brother.
Okay. Okay.
Hang on 1 second, and I should be right with you.
Okay.
I got what I need for you.